Hello again, welcome back. After our introduction to React, we're going to continue the lesson and start actually working with a React application and begin working on the first homework assignment. Okay, so here I am at the syllabus page, and our first lesson that we went over was here, and we're going to go into the assignment here. Okay, so I'm going to click on React product list. And this takes us to the assignment. So before we get too far into what's involved with the assignment here, let's take a look at the finished product, right? So I actually have the kind of a finished version of it in this tab over here. And what you're going to do is you're going to make a web page that looks something like this. You can look like anything you want, but what we're going to do is we're going to load up some data, right? So we'll have a JSON file that has a whole bunch of mock-up data in it, right? And it has all the information that you see here for each of these, invented products, right? So every product has a name, a price, and a category, okay? And there's 100 products here, okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to take all that data in and you're going to pull out all the category names, right? And then you're going to sort and filter those category names so you just have a unique list, because a lot of the categories will appear more than once, right? And then you're going to use that to generate all of the buttons up here, right? So, if I click on automotive, you can see that my app displays 6 products in the automotive category. Or if I click on baby, it displays 8 products in the baby category, right? So only the products in the baby category, right? You can see what the currently selected category is, right? And all of the links do that. So what you're going to do is you're going to create an app that does this. It's going to load the JSON data. It's going to pull out the category names. It's going to filter them down to just unique names. And then it's going to map all of the products to components that we display on the screen. And then when you click on one of these buttons, we're going to filter that list to only components that match the category name. Okay? So this is kind of our end result. Let's get started, right? So I'm going to go to the lesson here, and we can go over, or we can go to the assignment here, right? So the first part of the assignment is to load the data up, and then once you've loaded the data, we're going to kind of like, massage the data, like, kind of filter it and sort it out so it's in a form that we can use, because the JSON data is okay, but it doesn't, it's not quite in a form that our application wants to use, right? So we're along the way, we're going to talk about map, filter, and reduce, which are functional programming ideas, right? Okay. So let's get started, right? So you can read through this. I'm gonna just get started, and then we'll come back to the lesson, right? So the first thing I'm gonna do here is I'm going to make a open up a terminal here in my computer here, and I'm gonna make a brand new React app, okay? And what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it in this folder over here. So I'm going to cd into my class 1 folder here, and then I'm going to make a brand new React project. So to create a new React project, and actually you can go in the lesson here, if you go to project requirements, it says create a new React project with npx create React app. Okay, so you can copy and paste that, or just type it yourself, right? So I'm going to do npx create React app, and and then I'm going to give my app a name, right? So we'll call it React product list. Okay, so the name here can't have any spaces in it, right? And this is npx, not npm, so note there. So I'll hit return, and this will take a moment, and it'll download all of the stuff. If I look at lesson number 1 here, you can see that it says React product list there. Let me actually arrange this folder here. That's the old lesson. I'm gonna clean up my folder here. There we go, right? So this is the folder that Create React app is making right now. Okay, and you can see it's adding all these files to the folder. any moment now. Okay, great. So there's our finished project there. And you can see this has a bunch of files in it, right? We'll review what some of these files do. You're primarily concerned with the source directory. So all the work you do and all the files you edit and the files that you create and add, they all should go in the source directory, okay? So let me open this up in VS Code here. So I'm going to drag that on top of my code editor. And here is my React project. Okay. And if I look in the source directory, this is where I'm going to create my components and add my files. We'll need one more file for this project, okay? And that file is a JSON file that has the list of products in it. So I'm going to go to this link here. It's in the assignment. So if you scroll down to project requirements, right? It says copy the JSON file into your source directory, right? So I'll click on this and you can see it gives me a JSON file here. So to get this out of GitHub, I'm going to click on the raw button here, and this will give me just the raw data. And you can just do Command S to save it. It wants to add the .txt extension on there, so I'm going to get rid of the .txt extension, and I'm going to navigate to my directory here where I'm working, class number 1, and then I'm going to navigate to the source directory, right? So I'm in the source directory here, and then I'll save. And then I'm going to say don't append the .txt because this is a JSON file. It should just be .json, right? Okay. So there we go. So now we're all set. And if I look in here, you can see I've got data JSON, and there's all the JSON data. Okay. So let's get started with map, filter, and reduce. Okay. So first, let's talk about map. Okay. So map is a function that lets us transform an array. Okay. And it's a method of the array class. Okay. So you call map on an array. So if you have an array, you can say array.map. Okay, map takes one argument, and that is a function, a mapping function, right? And that function will receive one of the items from the array, and then it's expected to return a new item. And the new items get added to a new array, and that new array is what the map function returns. Let's take a look at this kind of emoji diagram here of what map does, right? So, if we look at this, I found this on Twitter. It was pretty good. It was in Python, so I rewrote this in JavaScript for us here. But you can see I've got an array here, and I call map on the array. So I say array.map. And so if I have an array of corn, cows, and chickens, I might run each of those things through the cook function. And cook function would take in the corn and return popcorn, right? Or the cook function might take in a cow and return a cheeseburger, okay? Or the cook function might take in a chicken and return a fried egg, which doesn't quite work, but you get the idea, right? Okay? Filter, on the other hand, returns an array that is a subset of the original array. So again, you call filter on an array. It's a method of the array class. So if we have an array and we call filter on that array, filter takes one argument that's a function, and that argument takes each of the items in the array, and it's expected to return true if the item is included in the output array, and false if not. Okay? Reduce is a little bit different but similar. It's a method of the array class, so we call reduce on an array. And then we give it a reducing function, and the reduce function takes an accumulator, which is the running total or the current thing that you're reducing to, and one of the items here. And so you can take the accumulator and the item and put them together, and when you're done, reduce returns a single value, okay? So the idea here is map takes an array and returns an array. And the idea is it transforms or changes each of the items in the source array, and you get a new array. It doesn't edit the original array. It doesn't change it. It just gives you a brand new array with all of the items transformed in it. So 3 items here, I get 3 items over here, but these are different items. But they're all based on what the source was, okay? Filter, on the other hand, returns an array with the same items in it, but it's a subset of those items. So we get a brand new array. It doesn't change the original array, but what it does is it gives us a new array that has a subset of what was in the source array. So we just tell it like, yeah, let's keep this item. No, don't keep that item. And we look at each item with the filtering function, okay? Reduce, we call it on an array, and it reduces that array to a single value. The idea here is that these are functions that are abstract ideas on the things that you do all the time with an array. Okay, so you're always doing these things with arrays. You're doing one of these 3 operations. You're mapping, you're filtering, or you're reducing. Okay, and you'll see when we work on the example here, we'll have you'll get some experience with this, right? But that's kind of a map, filter, and reduce in a nutshell. Okay. So let's scroll down a little bit and start working on the challenges here, okay? So we're going to go through several challenges here where we just work with the data first, and then we're going to start working with React components, and we're going to start displaying the data on the screen like you saw in the source app here, okay? But first we need to go through the data here and kind of arrange it and filter it and sort it and things like that, okay? So I have a list of challenges here, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these challenges, right? And then I'll kind of walk you through some of them right now, okay? So for the first challenge, what we're going to do is we're going to work in modules. So a module is a JavaScript file, and all of the code stays in that file, okay? So it keeps our code separated from the other code, okay? It makes our code safer to work with, right? So we're going to create a module for the data. So I'm going to make a brand new file, and I'll save it, and I'm going to call it data.js. So I'll have like my data.js and my data.json file, okay? So in React land, when we work in code, every file counts as a module, and every module is self-contained, okay? If a module wants to borrow code from another file, what you'll do is you'll import that code. So I'm going to do this step right here. I'm going to import the data from my JSON file. So I'll type import data from, and then I'm going to name my file. I'll do ./data.json. Okay, so I've imported the data. And if you want to export that data somewhere else, I can say export default data. Okay, so if I had another file that wanted to get the data from here, we could export it and that file could import it. Okay. Normally you can't use JSON directly in JavaScript, but the React boilerplate code allows us to import JSON, and it will convert the JSON into a JavaScript object, okay, when you do this, okay? Normally you can't just open up the JSON like this. You have to convert it. You have to parse it with json.parse, right? But they've got a little extra code in here that does that for us, which is really nice. Okay, so when you want to use code here, actually let me zoom in on that so you can see that more clearly. If you want to use code in another file or another module, you'll have to import that code, and if you want to share that code with another file, then you'll have to export it. Okay, so that's challenge number 1. Okay, so our next challenge is to get a list of the categories. So essentially the data here is an array of objects, right? So it's an array of objects, and if I look at the JSON data, you can see it starts with the square bracket here, and there's another square bracket way at the bottom of the page, and then every item in the array here is an object with these keys. It's got ID, name, category, description, price, rating, and units, okay? And then there's a value for each of those, okay? So, you know, if we wanted to get at one of the items here, we could say, you know, console.log, and I could say data bracket item number 0. Okay. So let's give that a try. Now this actually isn't going to work at first. You'll see why in a moment here, right? I'm going to start my code up. So I'm going to go to my console here, and I'm going to do yarn start. Oh wait, I have to navigate into the folder. Let's do cd the React product list, and then we'll do yarn start. And then any moment now, oh, there we go. So there's the default React project, okay? And what you're seeing here is what is in the app.js file, okay? So this is what we see here, right, in app.js. And you can see like this is a div here, and it's got a header, right? And then there's an image, and this image right here is the logo that we're seeing. And then underneath it, there's a paragraph that says edit source code, right? So this is the edit source code right here. And then underneath that, there's an anchor tag that says learn React, and that's what we're seeing at the bottom. So I'm going to actually just delete all this right now and type in an H1 and say, hello world. This will be our starting place, right? And if I save that, you can see now it just says hello world up here, right? So what did we do there? We wrote some JSX. So this function right here called app is a component, and a component function always has to return a block of JSX code. So the JSX code looks like HTML. So for a lot of cases, you can just write the HTML the way you would write it normally, okay? So we did that. Let's, I'm gonna actually remove this because we're not using it anymore. Let's import the data that we created here. So this data here, like you'll see if I save this and I look in the console here, you'll see there's no output, right? So I don't see the object that I logged to the console, right? Because we haven't actually used this module. So to use a module, you'll need to import it into some file that's actually used by the computer. So what I'm going to do, or by the browser, right? I'm going to go to app.js and I'll import that module. So I'm going to import data from, and then I'll do /data, right? And this time I'm not going to do data.json. I'm just going to do /data. And when I do that, it's going to import the JS file. Okay, so if you're using a JS file, you don't have to put the .js on the end. That's kind of a given. Okay, if you need another file that's not a .js file, then you have to put the extension on it. Okay, so now you can see once I've saved that, you can see here it loaded that object here, and I can see the object is category toys, description preserving systematic core, ID number 1, ZooLab 1207, rating 3, units 632. And if I look in my data JSON file, you can see that indeed is the first object that we have here. Okay, and if I wanted to get to the second object, I could get object number 1, and then you can see I get lot string, right? Kids, reduced human resource superstructure, right? 185.21, okay? So it looks like things are working, right? So here's a note. When you import something, if you include the word default, or actually when you export something with the word default, when you import it, you just put the name here, okay? If you export things that are not designated as a default export, what we're going to do is we're going to put a comma here and the curly braces, and we'll put the non-default exports inside the curly braces. So the default export goes here, the non-default exports go here. Okay, okay, great. So now let's try that. Let's make another export. So the first challenge here is to get an array of products. So the idea is I have an array of objects, but what I really want is I want an array of strings that are just the category names. So just the name here, the name here, and the name here, right, for all 100 products, okay? So what we'll do for this is we'll use map. So the idea here is we're doing a transformation, right? So we're transforming an array of objects into an array of strings. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this. I'm going to say const, I'm going to do, let's call this like all categories, right? And I'll set it equal to data. And let me close this thing for a moment, right? So I'm going to do data.map, okay? And again, just to reiterate what we talked about earlier, map takes a function as an argument. So I'm going to type in an arrow function here, and I'll type the whole syntax for it, right? And this function will receive one of the items from the data. So this will be our object, right? So I'll put object here, obj. You can name it whatever you want. It's a parameter variable, so you get to decide the name. And since I only have one variable here, I don't have to put the parentheses around it. So I'm going to just remove the parentheses just to make it a little more clean, okay? And next what we're going to do is we're going to return the transformed object. So I'm going to take object, and then I'm just going to get the category from that object, right? So remember, every one of our objects has a category field, and so I'm just going to return the value there, right? And so what that'll do is it'll make an array here that will be only the category names, okay? Since our function only has one line of code, we can get rid of the curly braces, and the return is implied, so we can also remove the return. So we can actually simplify that whole function down to this, okay? And now that we have all these categories right here, why don't we export them? So I'm going to add an export at the bottom here, and I'll use the curly braces, and I'll say let's export all categories, okay? And in our app.js, what I'd like to do is import those categories. So I'm going to go up here to import data, and right inside the curly braces, I'll say all categories. And you can see VS Code hints me because it sees that that's an export, okay? And maybe we'll do this, we'll do console dot log. We'll just log the data, and we'll also log all categories. Okay, so I'll save that. And then when I save, if my React app is running, it should automatically update. I'm going to actually clear the console and then refresh it. And you can see here is the list of all the objects. And below that, I have an array of all of the category names. So you can see here I've transformed all of these objects from an array of objects with a name, ID, category into an array of just the category names. Okay? So that's the solution for challenge number 2, right? So here we are, get all the category names. Now, the problem that we're at here is that the category names have some duplicates. So I want to remove the duplicates, right? So you can see I've got sports twice here. I've got, let me see, I've got sports again. I got music up here and here, right? So there's 100 products, but there's a couple in every category, right? So what I want to do is just get just one string for each category, each unique category name, okay? I'll leave that for you as a challenge, and maybe we'll cover it in the next video, okay? So you can give that a try on your own. There is some code hints down here, so you can look at challenge number 3, make a category list, a list of unique values, and I outlined 2 strategies for that here, okay? So you can give it a try, and then otherwise we'll cover it in the next video.